Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to Improving Student Attainment and Employability and Kazakhstan with Skills Education. This is the Times Higher Education Roundtable in partnership with Coursera. My name is Alistair Lawrence. I'm the Special Projects Editor at THE, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining today's panel of leaders from academia and industry. Before we begin, Eklavya Barbe, who's Regional Director for APAC and Japan at Coursera, is going to give us a brief overview of how Coursera is working with universities and the key findings from their collaboration. Eklavya?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Alistair. And good to see some familiar faces after a long time. So happy to be speaking with all of you, and also a privilege to be part of this panel. And what I'm going to cover in next few minutes is to share our perspective of what we are seeing in the higher education space, and also little deep dive on specifically around skills and employability, because that's what we are here to discuss today. Alistair, just confirming if you're able to see the screen. Perfect. All right. So just to get us started, since we're talking about employability and skills in education, I just wanted to take a step back and see what we've been seeing in the last 1.5 years or so when it comes to higher education. The first thing that we saw is that most of the universities are still grappling with the blended learning part, while last year all the universities and education institutes were in a way forced to get online. But as we coming back to a model where universities are thinking about a blended learning part, and that's becoming more and more mainstream discussion at most of the higher education institutes that we interact with. The second, which is the topic for our today's discussion, is employability. Given that there's so much of automation and digitization happening around the businesses, and also the impact of COVID on the job world, I think prioritizing student employability is becoming very, very important in all the higher education institutes and institutes that we interact with. The third is, given the pressures on the fee, pressures on the salaries, and all the cost pressures that the universities are facing, one of the main discussions that universities are doing internally as well as with their partners is to look at improving the affordability. And I think their online learning and education has a part to play, because with the same physical infrastructure, you can have a better learning opportunity for the students, and also increase some of the intake that most of the universities are thinking about. And finally, a very, very important piece is faculty development. As we saw last year, the faculty for most of the universities were not prepared to move online, and it was by accident and by chance that they had to move online. But as we move towards a blended learning approach, it's very, very important that we support the faculty members. And I just want to hear your thoughts on what are some of the concerns and the major trends that you are seeing in your university, in your discussions with your peers. I wouldn't wait for us to see the response on chat, but after I stop my screen share, I would love to see what are some of the things that you are seeing in your campuses and university. As we're talking about the skill, I think it's very, very important to talk about where those jobs are. And as we've seen across the world with digitization, most of the new jobs are coming in the digital space. So if you see to your left of the screen, there's a report from World Economic Forum, which clearly lays out which are the top 5 growing jobs where most of the jobs would be coming. And you can clearly see all those jobs are in digital space. If we zoom in a little more, and that's on your right, is another report from Microsoft, which lays out where those digital jobs would be coming. So if you look at 2021, which is this year, there'll be about 51 million new jobs in the digital area. But if you look at 2025, which is next 4 years, the number of jobs is almost 4x, close to 190 million. And there's 149 million new digital jobs coming across the world. But what's happening is our curriculum doesn't change so fast. And that's where the gap is increasing between what is being taught and what is being sought by the university, by the industry. And you would see many, many such reports where the CEOs, the hiring managers, and the companies are clearly talking about the skill gap between the fresh graduates which pass out of the colleges and are looking for jobs in the industry. And we also get to interact with many companies across the world, since we work with 3,000 plus organizations as part of Coursera for Business, we hear from most of the HR heads that they are not able to get talent in the areas that they are looking in the job world. And the students also realize this because they know where the jobs are. And that's what we have seen on our platform as well. And what you see here is some of the insights from our platform. And we looked at what are the skills that the students are building on our platform. And clearly, if you see the first column, the students are focusing on building digital skills, skills around AI, data science, machine learning, and other digital skills. And they're taking the courses and the professional certificates that help them acquire those digital skills. But the other thing that to look at is not everything is gloomy, right? So I've shared you some of the trends which are very, very alarming. But I think there are two good news on this slide. The first, what you see on your left, is that for the entry-level jobs, because these are the jobs that the graduates would be looking at, for all the entry-level jobs, and we have laid out some of the entry-level jobs here, is the time required to acquire those skills is on an average 40 to 50 hours. So which means that in about 50 hours of deep learning, a student can be prepared for some of those entry-level jobs. The other thing to look at is if a student wants to develop a skill around being a sales representative or about a customer support specialist or a developer, there are very, very high quality content which is available from our industry partners. And if you see on your right, is the professional certificates available from Salesforce, Google, IBM, Facebook, etc. So for example, if I'm a student, I want to learn about social media marketing, I can quickly do deep level content and acquire a skill on social media marketing by doing a professional certificate from Facebook. So that's what's available on the platform, and that's how students are looking at building skills. But it's also important for us to help these students because the students may not have the entire knowledge. And that's what we are trying to do with the universities, is to help universities to look at what are the skills important for each of those roles. And we've defined about 250 plus skill sets. And by skill sets, I mean a defined learning program for different roles. And what you see here on your screen is a skill set for a data scientist. So what does a skill set do is helps you identify what skills are relevant for a particular role, then look at what are the skill targets, which means what is the proficiency level of different skills important for that role. For example, in this case, for a data scientist, it is important that you need to have basic level of data management skills, but also mid to advanced level of skills in probability, statistics, and mathematics. So defining the proficiency level of each skill, and then finally laying out a learning path for a student to acquire those skills by doing these courses. So a student has to acquire these skills, and the student and the university management need not focus on what courses to do because it is already been laid out through a machine learning model. And the final piece is helping the students to learn by doing, especially because we're talking about digital skills. You can't acquire digital skills just by doing courses or seeing videos. You need to have an ability to practice what you're learning. Just to give an example, for example, in this case, what you see on the right is a video which is played for a student to look at how to learn working on a data set on a Tableau. But unless a student works on the real software, that student will not be able to acquire that skill. So on the left side, the student is able to work on the real software through a virtual desktop. And it's like working in a lab, right? In a physical environment, you work in a lab. But if you have to acquire digital skills, you work in a digital lab, which is what is provided through the guided projects. And the universities can also create their own guided projects for some of the special areas that they want the students to acquire those skills on. So students acquires the skill which are relevant, but it's also important for the universities to share that with the industry. Traditionally, there was no way for the universities to tell a company which is interested in recruiting that we have X number of students with Y skills. But now on the platform, as your students start developing the skills, you will be able to look at what is the skills that your students have developed and also what is the proficiency level. So if you see here, you will see multiple graphs with multiple colors, but essentially what it means is that it's a way of representation on the platform that you can show and look at any point of time to see how many students have developed a skill and what is the proficiency level. Are the students still at the early stage of learning, or they have acquired a mastery in that particular skill? And this is how you can look at real time as well as over a period of time, also do a comparison of the skills that students have developed across other learners on the platform. So in short, today, our partners who are using Coursera for Campus are largely using the platform and services for largely two things. One is helping the students to acquire the skills and making them job ready. So largely the career services part, looking at what skills are important, and then through the skill sets, acquire the skills which are relevant for those jobs. And the second part is curriculum integration. So the universities might look at, these are the areas where we may not have a teaching faculty. These are the areas where we can't change the curriculum, but we need to help the students acquire those learnings and skill, and they can augment that through the content which is already there on Coursera. And there are many, many examples, but just quickly, an example which may be relevant for this audience is a university, which is Iitu in Kazakhstan, which is already using Coursera for Campus. And they wanted to augment the digital skills because this is a university which is primarily focusing on the IT education. And they integrated Coursera curriculum with their own curriculum and helping the students to build skills through guided projects, through content and professional certificates available. And this is the second year of our partnerships, and the results have been phenomenal, both in terms of the skills that they have developed, the learning that is happening on the platform, but also the feedback that we are getting both from the faculty as well as students. I won't take much more time, but happy to share a little bit more as we progress through our discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Eklavya. Yes, I think that's a really good point. A really good point where we can start the roundtable discussion. And I'd like to begin by asking the panel how courses and curricula can be blended or are being blended at their institutions in order to increase student engagement. Loretta, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you, Alistair, and thank you very much, Eklavya. It's great to hear all the innovative work that's being done by Coursera with our neighbouring universities. So here at Nazarbayev University, we are primarily a research university. So of course we focus on skills and employability, and we focus on developing knowledge and students as co-creators of knowledge, and we focus on attributes. So skills and attributes and knowledge are all part of the work in which we're engaged in part of the academic side of the university. So when we're thinking about blended learning, we look to some of our lead users essentially who are primarily in our master's programs, so particularly our Graduate School of Business, Graduate School of Public Policy, who are looking at creating teaching opportunities right at the moment, which are hybrid. So it's partly online, partly face-to-face. So they've got the technology and they're working on all of those courses right now because they're dealing with more mature executive level students. But in the undergraduate programs where we have, undergraduate majors in computer science and data science, and we've got an Institute of Artificial Intelligence, which is working on some of the areas that Eklavya explained to us. Because of the pandemic, it accelerated our process of creating blended learning opportunities where professors do pre-recorded lectures, provide a lot of readings and resource for students, and then the classroom session is a highly curated, facilitated session using a lot of GTAs or graduate teaching assistants who are our PhD students, working closely with professors to guide the discussion. So students come to those Zoom classrooms ready to learn, fully informed, fully briefed, having done some preliminary assessment tasks, and then the classroom session is an opportunity to dig really deep. Because what we want to do with all of our students is create the T-shaped student, so someone who's very deep in their discipline, whether it is robotics or artificial intelligence or sociology, anthropology, but who's broad as well. So we want breadth and depth because we know that artificial intelligence and big data is often a tool rather than an end in itself. It's a tool by which our students can help understand and solve complex social problems. So as they go into professional life, or in our case, many of them go into further graduate programs, both here in Kazakhstan and around the world, we want them to be able to develop the skills and the knowledge and the attributes to really implement the concept of the T-shaped student. So Alistair, I don't know if that's useful.
No, it does. Thank you. Yeah, I had a follow-up question which was asked, how has the feedback that you've got from students starts to change, or the interaction with students that you've got? Because presumably now you have the opportunity to create a slightly stronger feedback loop with students if you're actually
absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that question, Alistair, and I'll be interested to know what my colleagues have experienced. Our students have always been very assertive and very, very full and frank in their feedback, and that's increasingly so in the pandemic and post-pandemic periods. So they tell us exactly what they think, both through all the formal mechanisms, obviously course evaluations at the end of every course, but also through the mechanism of student government. And our student government leaders are voting members of all our big strategic bodies, such as Academic Council and Research Council. And they're very upfront with telling us about what works and what doesn't work. And in addition, we have an institutional research team that conduct major surveys every semester of the student experience. And we had a very good response rate to our last survey, 75% response rate. So 4,500 students, which is 3/4 of our overall student body. And they told us that the student experience of online learning during the pandemic was overall not too bad, but there were pockets that loved it and pockets that didn't love it as much. So our master's students tended to prefer online learning because many of them are mature students, many of them have families, and online learning meant they could manage their competing tasks quite efficiently and effectively. And interestingly, our foundation students who are undergraduate students, they enjoyed online learning. Again, I think for lots of reasons to do with, becoming accustomed to more of a university lifestyle. The undergraduate students generally didn't love it so much because they missed out on all the social interactions that they love, which is why this current semester, even though we're still doing mostly online teaching because the pandemic is still here and we're still being very, very conservative, we are bringing about about a third of our students we're bringing back to campus to physically live in the dorms, even though most of them continue to learn online. But they're very assertive about what works and what doesn't for them. And I don't know if my colleagues have found that as well, but they've always been open, but they're more open than ever before during the current era.
Okay, thank you very much. Asel, would you like to add to that? If you could tell us a little bit about your experience of dealing with students in the current climate. Also, I'd like to say to other colleagues on the call, if you would like to turn your webcams on, it just makes it a little bit easier to interact with the rest of the group if possible. Thank you. But Asel, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to meet you today. Yes, that was very challenging for us to transform to blended format to online, if we be honest. And of course, it was very challenging for our faculty and for students to change their life within this short period of time. That's why we think that such opportunities like Coursera's courses and other online formats that we usually practice of integrate into the educational process were very supportive for all of us. And we see that this opportunity and possibility give us to more time and more qualified actions to transform to a new format of studies. Currently, of course, within 1 year, we have transformed all our studies into the online, and we are ready for that. We can surely say that now, yes, we are ready. But a year before, it was a different situation, and of course, such courses that we have at Coursera or other platforms were like helpful for all of our for all our schools and for the students. We have integrated some courses into the blended format, and also supported those who wanted to look through all courses in Coursera and to receive more and more qualified and highly developed courses from esteemed universities. That we think that this is like a synergy of all universities, global synergy that actually helps our Kazakhstani universities and educational institutions to stand against the pandemic and against the situation that has been raised within these 2 years. As for skilling and upskilling, we had different ideas on this, and I'm sure that Dr. Asalbek can also share some his viewing on how we see this, including lifelong learning and blended format and online perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had a broader question to colleagues on the panel about how greater personalization is now possible when we are planning curriculums and teaching students the skills that they want. Have they seen any particular patterns emerging with how students are starting to learn when they have perhaps more of a choice or feel like they can make more of requests about what they want to be taught? Loretta mentioned that the student body at her institution are very vocal. I was just wondering if other people were receiving increased amounts of student feedback and how they were processing those. Diana, Altrim, Diana, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Diana. I'm from Kazakh British Technical University. So we at KBHU last year suffered a lot of unexpected situations related to the student actually class engagement, the ability to adapt to the online education. And I believe this year, like this academic year, things are much better. So everyone got adjusted to the online education, to the hybrid format of education. But we were quite open with the students. So regularly we had some surveys, asking students in class, asking students from the dean's offices and from the students' affairs offices. So what we found out is actually it's better for students to tell what they want. So they're telling us what they want. And we're trying to find this balance between keeping the high level of educational standards, academic integrity, trying to use the proctoring system, kind of talking to students, explaining them why we're still here and actually working for the same thing, despite being it online or despite it being in hybrid format. And this year, like from my classes, so we just started classes 2 weeks ago, I see that students, they already like a professionals, like studying online. I believe that undergraduate students, in our case, they're more happy to study online, like, I mean, openly. They're happy to study online, but of course they miss interaction. For those who are on graduate programs, it's good for them in terms of the time savings, so it's just easy for them to combine like other aspects of their lives, such as families, their work. But still, it was much difficult for them to transform to online. So some of the students, they didn't really want to go to online or formats of education. So I would say that for us, we were able to adapt and adjust to our students because of this communication open negotiation. And of course, we saw some resistance. So we know how in change process, everything goes back to being a kind of a good, finding the right change agent, basically. So trying to find this dialogue between us as a university and the students, like those who are here to study and get at the end of the day, like their degree and their knowledge. With the use of the, let's say, like online education, we also developed our own courses at the university. So we have our own like green room, faculty is being recorded. So this is something that's new for faculty because they're not really, they never done it before. So we also had some special training courses for them to teach them how they can develop their courses for students, pre-recorded courses. And this kind of format, of course, allows some flexibility to everyone involved, but still, I'm sure everyone cannot wait when they get back to the campus and finally will be together with their friends and colleagues.
And have you
you.
found that there's a difference between how domestic and international students and staff are managing the change? Is there a greater demand to be on campus from an international element, perhaps?
International students, they want to come back, so they want to be here. But if you know, like last spring, so the last semester, I think we had quite a high level of cases here, so everyone was asked to go back home. But international students, they didn't want to go, so they just stayed in our dormitories, even though they were studying online. So for them, it's kind of to feel connected to the university, they have to be at least in the same country. So this is what we found out. But of course, like comparing situation this year and the last year, so it's very hard to even say like things much better now. And I'm sure like everyone can agree with that because we kind of, like, we're adjusting to everything. So this year it's much better. And like faculty is being creative as well. So the way we deliver, the way we engage with the students in a hybrid format, all of the teaching methods are changing. So this is why we're not just newbies here. So we're quite experts, all of us, with this online education.
And I have a question for the panel as a whole. Have there been any particular challenges about implementing the cultural change with faculty to ask them to work in such a different way, not just moving things to online, but also starting to be more cognizant of skills education and blending that into the main curricula? Is there generally an appetite to change curricula in this way, or was it something that was arguably being done already and is now just people are being a bit more aware of and a bit more articulate about?
If I can answer this question.
Please.
So
yeah.
I remember like last year we were trying to implement the changes on the go. So when all of us moved to online, so we had to make some changes in our curriculum, in our syllabus. This year, like even last semester, everything is quite planned. So we have plan A, we have plan B. So now everything is planned out well. But what's important now, I think that everyone noticed that it's just not about the just the knowledge, but more about engagement. So how do you work with your students? How do you engage them in the class, even though everyone is sitting online through their laptops? And this kind of connection is very important for the good learning environment. And we had some, not necessarily the resistance from faculty, but more was about deliver the classes, the way they deliver the.
Sorry, if you've got some slight technical glitches on
Zoom.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, Dan, your audio dropped out for just a moment, but I think I got the broader point that you were making.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a bit more about Coursera's work with its partners in the region, and how much is this engagement emerging as sort of a key challenge? You know, if institutions don't get that right, then doing everything else becomes so much more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad that Dana made that point around change management, because this is something new, right? And especially given that last year it was a forced change, and now that if you're asking people to do a consistent way of learning online, it's very, very important that we communicate it well. And communication is a very, very integral part of it. Starts with the top management, but also communicate why this change is important to the faculty as well as to the students. And the two important points here, and I'll just refer to what Dr. Loretta and Diana said earlier. To Dr. Loretta's point, I was very happy to hear that you talked about a T-shaped profiling and T-shaped skill. And this is exactly what we hear from the head of HR and learning in the large organizations. Because today the students are so engrossed in learning a skill which is important for them to get a job that they forget to develop a broader skill which may be important when they go in a working environment. So what the universities are looking at is building a career or a learning program which helps them to acquire deep skills in a particular topic, but also learning plan that helps them to acquire more career skills, communication skills, collaboration skills, negotiation skills. These are very, very important human skills that are important for the students when they transition from being a student to a working professional. And the other aspect that Diana mentioned on beyond the change management is creating content. Because for the faculty members, it's important for them to understand that as the world moves towards blended learning, they should also be equipped with the skills that help them to create content. And that's what some of our partners are doing, that they started with just the content that was available on Coursera, but now using our private authoring, they are creating the content on Coursera, which remains a private content just for their students. So these are some of the ways where we're partnering with the universities to help their students acquire career skills, have a T-shaped personality, but also helping the faculty members to create their own content so that they can use to teach their own students.
Thank you very much. Igor, I'd like to ask about your work as the Vice Rector for Global Partnerships at Almaty Management University, if I can, just to ask how it's changing the perspective, perhaps, of course planning or the integration with industry. I mean, employability is a very important metric, but it's also important more broadly that universities are engaging with outside sectors in different ways in order to be able to help students become more employable, but also think about the bigger picture about what the future of teaching and learning is going to look like. Have the conversations you've had with your global partners changed a lot in the past 18 months?
Well, thank you, Alistair. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to see you and pleasure to meet you. Here at AlmaU, we do partner with many institutions and organizations in Kazakhstan and abroad. And obviously, the COVID pandemic has affected us some in negative ways, have been really positive. For example, we have initiated a strategic partnership with Arizona State University from the US and the Santana Alliance, which is a compilation of different universities across the world. And we think that the pandemic has opened up new horizons and new opportunities for expanding the partnerships. I would say not like vertically, but horizontally, making it more meaningful in a way. I also wanted to comment on what has been said earlier. We see that our students also change the patterns of how they behave as students in the institution, both local students and international students. As was mentioned earlier, Kazakhstan has been through a very tough period of time with the pandemic and with the cases rising every day. That's why we were very limited in communication for the students. So engaging them online and offering them opportunities to study online, like online mobility, for example, that has been one of the solutions that AlmaU came up with. And we think that obviously it's not the same when they're on campus, but what we try to do is to offer at least small teaching groups for postgraduate students. For example, for MBA students, we have the biggest cohort in Kazakhstan, about 800 MBA students at the moment. And we thought that moving them online would complicate things a lot, because networking and face-to-face connections between the faculty and the students on MBA level is very crucial, as opposed to, say, undergraduate level. That's why we did everything possible to make sure that they study offline as much as possible and do some project work, dissertation work online. So that was the solution for us. And in terms of partnerships, we spoke to many of our corporate partners, and they obviously were also moved online. Again, we haven't experienced any problem in finding new partners or expanding our current partnerships, because they're students who are usually the MBA and executive education clients. They were okay by studying offline and online in a blended format. Okay.
Do you think there will be permanent change going forward in you keeping this format, or I mean, you mentioned for postgraduates the face-to-face was particularly important. Do you think there will be more appetite for face-to-face as hopefully there are fewer restrictions and people can move more freely, or do you think that there will be it will be a true mix, and some students will prefer the flexibility that Loretta was talking about earlier?
Well, actually, the funny thing is that our postgraduate students actually prefer the face-to-face connection. So they asked us, like, find a way, make us sit in the class. So from their feedback, we see that we would still stick to the offline as much as possible, of course, respecting all of the regulations that, you know, the doctors tell us. Yeah, so I think we keep the same format. But for undergrads, for example, we decided from this year, even if the pandemic is gone, we would keep certain courses, some of the compulsory courses that are required by the ministry, like, I don't know, history of Kazakhstan or something like that. We'll still keep them online because it saves time and it saves much more resources, so we can focus on more specialized education for our students. And as was earlier mentioned by Asiel, some of our faculty are very active on Coursera, which is a huge thank you to Coursera team for offering their courses in the pandemic. That was right on time, because some of the faculty actually were the role models for our students to engage in studying Coursera, and then showing that kind of as a proof that they gained some knowledge, and that was recognized by our university towards their credits and academic progress.
Great, thank you very much. I mean, to that point about awarding credits, I wanted to ask the panel about assessment and how it's changed over the past few months, because again, there will have been perhaps some permanent changes introduced as a result of a forced change that's been particularly effective, but there will also have been real challenges that have been presented and things that are not easily remedied by shifting online. Loretta, what's the balance been of this at your institution, and how difficult a period of adjustment has it been, and also how much has it been an opportunity or a challenge to teach skills, embed them with assessment and teach them effectively during this period?
Sure. Thanks, Alistair. It's a really timely question. I think some of my colleagues have already mentioned some of the trends that we've seen in our university as well. We did have some faculty that would have resisted moves to online teaching, but of course there was no alternative. So everyone went online, and some of our faculty, a small proportion who were used to doing very traditional lectures with, let's say, a midterm exam and then a final examination at the end, had to adjust. And when we moved to online, we ran a series of video workshops, and we challenge faculty to use this incredible time to think creatively about assessments. And for instance, we had a brand new core curriculum course that was just coming online, which was the first time we've had an undergraduate business course called Business 101. Igor might be interested in this one. It's interesting because it's compulsory for all of our undergraduate students, and it's a way to develop skills in entrepreneurship with some basics of accounting and finance, and then students have to create a business plan. That's the assessments. So that was run for the first time last year, just as the pandemic was really taking hold. So the instructors on that course decided, okay, this will all be online. We've got 525 students every semester. What do we do with them? We can't just do a midterm quiz and then a final exam. That's not going to work. So they thought long and hard, and they created group-based projects, which requires a lot of teamwork, a lot of working offline. So in the sense that there's facilitated sessions in the class, in the Zoom room, but the teams themselves have to set up times outside of the set time and then manage themselves as young adults and young emerging professionals, so that everyone has to contribute. And there's assessment components which ensure there's minimum free riding, because students really vote on each other to make sure everyone is making the right kind of contribution. So I think it's one of the examples where we moved from some fairly traditional thoughts about assessment to using much more project-based, creative-based assessment. So these students create business plans for real businesses, and then the best ones voted by the students get to work with our incubator projects on campus, and they'll get money to actually start the businesses that they've designed. So it's been, for all the tragedy that the pandemic has created, there are definitely some opportunities, particularly in terms of assessment. And of course, I think, as many of my colleagues would have experienced as well, one of the other advantages is that some of our students have been on virtual internships. We had students in engineering doing virtual internships in Australia without having to leave the country, but still getting some experiences. And others have said that one of the great things, it's been much easier to get guest speakers, guest lecturers, people from all over the world who are happy to work in different time zones to provide really creative and thoughtful expert input into their classes. So for all the dramas, I think those that have been able to adapt to change have found it to be really useful. We have teaching awards every year, as many universities do, and the winner of our Innovative Teaching Award this year was from our business school, Tom Venemont, and he created a whole gamification approach to teaching corporate finance. He set up avatars and did all kinds of incredible work, and he really seized this opportunity to really think very differently about how to teach corporate finance, and has done it extremely well. So there's been a range of different approaches, I would say, but the people that really seize the moment have done it very successfully.
Okay, great, thank you. It's really good to hear. To your point about the peer review of projects for the core competency courses, was that something new that you brought in, or was it something that was easier to codify and measure when you moved it online?
We haven't done that much in the undergraduate programs before. We, like IGRIM, we've got MBA students as well, not as many as IGRIM has, but we've always done a little bit of peer review in the graduate programs, but we haven't done it to scale in undergraduate programs this way before. But the instructors felt it was an important check and balance when a big part of the assessment was actually group work with a defined output, which was a business plan and a video that went with the business plan. So students need to really be able to say to each other, we've all contributed equally, or someone has been lazy and someone hasn't done the hard work. And that's just not acceptable, because what we say to students is that your reputation starts the minute you walk into the university. Your reputation as a reliable, trustworthy citizen of this community starts now. It doesn't start when you graduate, when you start work for PwC or Google or Schlumberger. It starts right now. So we really challenge students to develop the 8 graduate attributes that we have, and number 7, which we reinforce all the time, which, as Sal and Diana have already mentioned, is the one about integrity. So students can't pretend they've done the work if they haven't done it, and the other students will hold them to account, and that creates good corporate citizenship that serves them well in professional life. We also get alumni from our university to come back as, say, judges on some of the student competitions, and they're terrific at reinforcing these integrity principles, because in professional life you can't pretend that you've raised the money or done the work. You have to be who you say you are. And we often talk about the old traditions in the City of London in corporate finance, where a handshake really means something, that your word is your bond. If you shake a business partner's hand and you say, I will do this for you, then that's real and that means something. So it's true as an undergraduate. So we're trying to really reinforce these principles through assessment, as well as through all the co-curricular activities as well.
Great, thank you very much. To the other panel, to the rest of the panel, I was wondering, are there examples of peer review that you've introduced over the past 18 months, or again, that have been easier to move online, or do you think there is more opportunity for it, more appetite for it? Asa?
Okay, if I may add, thank you for this contribution, because really, in reality, we have great experience to transfer all our studies into digital format. And we suppose that, as Loretta mentioned, that our faculty, our staff, administration, they did much of work and took a lot of force in order to create these possibilities. And actually, for Kazakhstani universities, I suppose this pandemic was like a push to digital format of studies that we didn't had before. and that actually improved the digital transformation of Kazakhstani higher education, and all formats that we currently have in assessment, in following the integrity, in how we cooperate or collaborate entirely with our partners locally or in abroad. Actually, everything is transformed, and what we actually have for now is improvement of all our spheres of academic activity, starting from assessment, starting from how we teach and study, and coming to how we support our students, the emotional health, because this isolation also was very important to support all our community and the universities. And from this point of view, we think that pandemic also made our university closer to each other. In Kazakhstan, there was some additional support from the government, from the community of academicians who shared the experience between each other, providing special online councils, and in order to share experience, in order to give advice to each other how to improve digitalization of every university, especially in the regions. So what would be very important for us make more larger community of our mutual effort in going to this style of life for now.
Thank you very much. Adrian, Diana, do you think that expanding peer learning or the opportunity for students to give feedback to one another, does this perhaps build some of the skills that Eklavi was talking about right at the top of the hour? You know, the things that employers want in terms of them perhaps being able to work as a team, improving their communication skills, having other aspects that make them more attractive, and also make it less of a shock when they enter the job market, because they have some experience of working with others in this way. Diana, I think you're nodding. I'm not sure. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. So actually what we experience is that students, when they work together, they feel happier. So even though it's a challenge for them to work together sometimes because of, you know, like as we call them, like free riders, like students who don't really want to contribute to the team, but still want to get a good grade. When they work together, students, they feel happier. But of course, I believe it happened even before pre-pandemic, this online work that they've been doing together. So even a few years back, students were telling us that we normally do the group projects, not necessarily meeting offline. So they did it online using various platforms, social media, where they had this kind of group discussions, they were solving the cases. But these days, of course, like when they are in the class, like online class, I believe they are quite happy to do the job together, because when you study online, you always feel lonely. So there is like no one around you, you're lonely, like you and your computer, your materials. When we introduce any group assignments, any kind of group projects in the class, even outside the classes, like extracurricular activities, they're very happy to do it together. So as a team, this is why I believe that like the part of the whole learning experience is actually giving them skills that will help them easier to adjust to the workplace, to the work environment. That's why for us as a university, giving that kind of social context to the things that we do with the students in terms of the education is quite important. And this is why a lot of studies like that have been done in the past few years, like especially like last year because of the COVID, they noticed that, and they found out that university is not just education, it's more about community of students. So the networking and all of this is kind of contributing to the future careers of the student. And this is why for us, it's quite important. And I hope students really appreciate the efforts that all of us as educators do for that, because, you know, like it's challenge these times, the challenging times.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hopefully they do. Adrian, are there any conversations you've had with your corporate partners that suggest that they're becoming more aware of the value of this type of learning and collaboration?
Well, at the beginning of the pandemic, our Graduate School of Business has offered a series of online webinars for the businesses, mostly SMEs, of course, they called it the business life hacks. So like every a few days there was a webinar that was organized for the purpose of helping the businesses to survive in the pandemic, or to kind of foresee and forecast what's going to happen, and how to kind of overcome business challenges. And I think that was very rewarding in the sense that we actually did some impact on the community of SMEs in Almaty, mostly. I think that was something very important. It was very important to build a kind of a platform for the businesses, for our corporate partners, to kind of network and talk to each other and maybe help each other to solve some issues. Like we have a Telegram community, a channel for our MBA graduates and current students. So they talk there, they like sending like, I need this and that, can you advise me on something, stuff like that. So even like this kind of C2C connections and B2B connections, I think that was the role of AlmaU at that moment, to kind of create this platform for communications. And as Diana mentioned, it's very important, yes, to kind of make sure students have a place where they can talk to each other and share the peer feedback. We have an ongoing project that is financed by the EU and implemented by the UNDP on educating Afghan women and empowering them to kind of get new skills and stuff. I think that project was very successful, and it was also hit by the pandemic, but we were lucky the students were here. Even though they studied online, they lived together. So like they talk to each other every day. So whatever feedback they have, it was a kind of a group feedback, because they had an assignment group leader who would come to us as university administrators and discuss with us the issues starting from their social life, some household issues coming to obviously academic and kind of research activity, whatever they have. So we assigned a specific person who would oversee our international students who are in Almaty during the pandemic and study online, because first we need to know that they're safe and okay, and secondly is that they are fine with the academic process, because with the challenges of moving from offline to online, there were some classes changed, some people don't speak English, then these students get lost, things happen. So it was important for us as international team to kind of oversee that process and get the feedback from the students and react as quickly as we can.
And how much it's an interesting point you made about the C2C platforms and using Telegram and things like that. Do you find there's been different platforms favored by students of different nationalities, or is it a case that once they've joined the institution, they're very happy to pick up on whatever C2C platform seems to be the dominant one for their course or their peer group?
Well, I think it's up to them really which platform they want to use, but maybe Dinar and Nasel, who work closely with the students and with the academic teams, they would know more about specific platforms. But for social media, like I know that business people, they would prefer Telegram, say, over WhatsApp, because there are more options there, and for us it's easier to administer.
Okay, thank you very much. We're a little bit oh, sorry, Dinar, please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to comment that what I found mostly used by students and teachers as well is WhatsApp. It was very like the most favorite tool to use by everybody, because it's very quick, it doesn't have any ads and no interference, so that's the preferred app. And regarding the social media, I think Instagram is definitely one of the mostly used at AlmaU. That's about it.
Okay, thank you. We've got about 5 minutes left. Klavia, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about how Coursera is seeing the student journey change holistically, particularly towards things like, the peer review is obviously a big part of this now, and that, it's great to see students firstly, perhaps being assessed in slightly different ways, but also embracing the opportunity to learn from each other in more depth. Are there any general trends or patterns that you are seeing with personalized learning in groups of students that you think will perhaps continue over the medium to long term because they could support something like lifelong learning as students continue their journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big change that we are seeing, right? The students of today are not like we were students many years ago. I mean, for us, everything that was taught in the class was the only thing that we learned. But today, as the students come in the class, they already know a lot, right? So the teachers need to know much more than the students know, because you can't assume that the students are like blank slate and whatever you write on it will be the first thing that they know. Students are much more aware, not only about the subject, but also what's happening outside the campus. And that's why one of the points that Agrim made, I liked it about the collaboration. The students love collaboration. They love to learn not only from their teachers, but also from their peers. And this is where we are seeing a peer assessment very popular with our students. So on our platform, when you do a course, not only is the assessment in the forms of quizzes and questions, but also peer assessment. And that's where the excitement begins for students, because they not only get to learn from other students, but also students on Coursera who could come from anywhere in the world. So if I'm doing a course on, say, finance or negotiation, when I submit my assessment, that assessment can go to a banker in London or a retail expert in Australia or a student in India. And that's how you get to assess each other. So that helps in the proper assessment. Also, the other thing that was discussed earlier was on the pure assessment part. And what we are seeing is that while the faculty members trust the assessment which is there on Coursera, because the assessment comes from a Michigan or a Yale or Macquarie or Google, but also using the private authoring, the faculty members are able to create their own assessments. So in addition to the assessments which is already there on the course, they also do the assessments using the private authoring. So it becomes more robust way of testing what the student has done. And on your last point, Alistair, I think students completely know what's happening outside in the job world. And that's where the lifelong learning aspect comes very closely, because they need to know what's happening in a bank and a telecom company, because of the social media tools we discussed, Telegram and WhatsApp. So now they are not only interacting with who is there in the campus, but they're also interacting with who's there outside the campus, outside the country. So they know what's happening in different industry and they want to learn. So unlike in the past, if I was given a syllabus, I would stick to it. But now the syllabus is not just what is being taught in campus, but the syllabus is what is being taught in the industry.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a couple of minutes left. I was wondering if any of the panel had anything particularly that they'd noticed about the appetite for lifelong learning changing with their students. Are they having different types of requests about it, different types of questions about it? Idrim?
Yes, I wanted to talk about the lifelong learning in a sense that we observe the need for lifelong learning as it is on the market, especially in the pandemic, as people lose their jobs or they decide they don't want to go back to their previous jobs. What we did, we transformed our executive education office into extension. So now anyone who wants to learn anything from the age, I don't know, 5 to the age of 100 and something, they can come and ask for certain classes. What we want to do like digital literacy for senior citizens, like silver age citizens, so that they know how to use, smartphone and how to, I don't know, get on online banking and check their stats instead of going to the bank and wait in line. And that's actually safer for them to stay at home rather than going to crowded places. So we were looking at lifelong learning not as just studying over years, not as a time frame, but mostly as enriching your life with different things that you can learn from formal, informal education. And that's why we say, like, it's not the triple L, it's the 4L that we need to focus on. So it's lifelong learning in a sense of the time, and life in sense of kind of your environment that you learn from.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, that takes us right up to time, so we don't have any longer for this discussion, but I'd like to thank you all very much for taking part. It's been really great to hear about your insights and the trends that are emerging in the region, and also all the great innovative work that you and your colleagues are doing, and also your students by the sound of it. There will be an on-demand version available for anyone who'd like to review or share this discussion, and it will be sent to everyone who's registered here today alongside a summary article on the THU website. So I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us and sharing your insights, and we hope to be able to engage with you at future THE events. Thank you very much.